Calaroga Shark Media.
Hello, I'm Johnny Mac with your daily comedy news. Big stories today from Hasan Minhaj and Dave Chappelle, but a quick look at late night. Jimmy Fallon pointed out the new Speaker of the House's name is Mike Johnson, and if that name sounds familiar, it's because it's on every fake ID. Seth Meyers said, the Speaker race was so embarrassing, they're not even giving their real names anymore. Mike Johnson is the name you give when you check into your motel with your mistress. That's what Spirit Halloween calls their Michael Jackson costume. I love that joke. Jesus Nice, you're not getting the Daily Show. He went with... But what we do know is he wants nationwide limits on abortion. He wants to criminalize gay sex, and he even wants to ban reggaeton. All right, I'm lying on the last one, but that seems like his vibe. Hasan Minhaj put out a 20-minute statement. I tried to capture it, and every time I went to play it, an ad would pop up. I did get some of it. Let's listen to the beginning.
And I've been asked by a lot of people to give my perspective on what is happening in the region. I've also been asked, wait a second, aren't you a liar? Now, for those of you who don't know, back in September, the New Yorker ran a piece on me called Hasan Minhaj's Emotional Truths, in which a reporter fact-checked my stand-up specials and found some factual inaccuracies that they wanted to ask me about. So I sat down with them to explain my writing process and why I make certain creative choices in my stand-up. Now, when the article came out, it got picked up by almost every single news outlet, all of them basically saying the same thing.
Now, as I watched this, I didn't feel like he was genuine. I'll tell you what he said, but my whole vibe watching it was, oh, I don't trust you anymore. Whether that's fair or not, that's how I feel, Hassan. In the video, he says, with everything that's happening in the world, I'm aware that even talking about this now feels so trivial, but being accused of faking racism is not trivial. It's very serious, and it demands an explanation. To everyone who read that article, I want to answer the biggest question that's probably on your mind. Underneath all that pomp, is Hasan Minhaj just a con artist who uses fake racism and Islamophobia to advance his career? Because after reading that article, I would also think that. He says he took a beat before responding to the story, both because of the state of the world and because he'd been processing the criticism. Minhaj says, I just want to say to anyone who felt betrayed or hurt by my stand-up, I am sorry. I made artistic choices to express myself and drive home larger issues affecting me and my community, and I feel horrible that I let people down. The reason I feel horrible is because I'm not a psycho, but this New Yorker article definitely made me look like one. It was so needlessly misleading, not just about my stand-up, but also about me as a person. The truth is, racism, FBI surveillance, and the threats to my family happened, and I said this on the record. In response to Hassan's video, the New Yorker issued their own statement to The Hollywood Reporter. Their statement reads, Hasan Minhaj confirms in this video that he selectively presents information and embellishes to make a point, exactly what we reported. Our piece, which includes Minhaj's perspective at length, was carefully reported and fact-checked. It is based on interviews with more than 20 people, including former Patriot Act and Daily Show staffers, members of Minhaj's security team, and people who have been the subject of his stand-up work, including the former FBI informant Brother Eric and the woman at the center of his prom rejection story. We stand by our story. So the whole prom thing in Hasan Minhaj's Netflix special, Homecoming King. He tells the story of asking a white girl to prom. He gave her the pseudonym Bethany Reed. That's fine, using the pseudonym. Makes sense. And then being told by the mother that Bethany won't go with him because the family doesn't want her daughters in pictures with a brown boy. Hasan says, Bethany's mom really did say that. It was just a few days before prom. I created the doorstep scene to drop the audience into the feeling of that moment, which I told the reporter. He then played an audio clip of his conversation with writer Claire Malone. The video also shows emails and texts between Minhaj and Bethany, which he said he provided to the magazine, showing Bethany thanking him for protecting her and her family, and at least indirectly acknowledging that her parents turned Minhaj away from being Bethany's prom date. Hassan says, my team and I repeatedly tried to give them the emails you just saw. We confirmed the emails were sent to the reporter and their fact checker before the article came out. They knew my rejection was due to race. I confirmed it on the record and provided corroborating evidence, and yet they misled readers by excluding all that and splicing two different quotes together to leave you thinking that I made up a racist incident. This is a lot. You can find the video if you've got 20 minutes. It's on the Hollywood Reporter's website. As for other stories, Minhaj admits that he embellished the stories about being harassed by law enforcement that was surveilling the mosque he and his family attended, and that he took his daughter to a hospital after she exposed what turned out to be fake anthrax. He apologizes in the video for commingling fact and fiction, but says that his stand-up work allows for more artistic license I thought I had two different expectations built into my work as a storytelling comedian and my work as a political comedian, where facts always come first. That's why the fact-checking on Patriot Act was extremely rigorous, the fact-checking in my congressional testimony deeply rigorous, but in my work as a storytelling comedian, I assume the lines between truth and fiction were allowed to be a bit more blurry, and I get why a journalist would be interested in where that line sits. I just wish the reporter had been more interested in their own premise. Someone genuinely curious about truth and stand-up wouldn't just fact-check my specials, they would fact-check a bunch of specials. They would establish a control group, a baseline, to see how far outside the bounds I was in relation to others. They wouldn't just cherry-pick a few stories. Wow, this is so much. Hasan Minhaj concludes, the guy in the article is a proper effing psycho, but I now hope you feel like the real me is not. I'm just a guy with IBS and low sperm motility. Again, there is much more important news happening in the world right now that needs your attention, so I appreciate you watching. I take the note, and I hope to see you at the next show. I am wondering, all right, so did somebody suggest we got to do some career damage control here, since supposedly he was getting the Daily Show and they supposedly rescinded that? So is this now like, dude, we got to put the fires out? And I don't know what's going on here. Very, very long video. The New York Times recapped Dave Chappelle's show in Raleigh, North Carolina on Wednesday. They say Chappelle's about 24 minutes into a set when he briefly touched on the remarks he had made at the Boston show. So I guess Dave is now admitting that he was at the Dave Chappelle concert last week, the one in Boston that led some people to walk out. Chappelle told the crowd, "Right now I'm in trouble because the Jewish community is upset, but I cannot express this enough. No matter what you read about that show in Boston, you will never see quotation marks around anything I said. They don't know what I said. It's all hearsay. The other night, I said something about Palestine in Boston and got misquoted all over the world, and I will not repeat what I said." The Times says a woman in the crowd responded by shouting, "Free Palestine." Chappelle quotes, "Please, please, miss, listen, don't start it up or I'm going to be in the news cycle for another week. This thing that's happening in the Middle East is bigger than everybody. This is what's happening, and believe me, I understand what's happening in Israel is a nightmare. What's happening in Palestine is a nightmare." Continuing to quote Chappelle, "There's only two kinds of people in the world, people who love other people and the people that have things that make them afraid to love other people. Pray for everyone in Israel, pray for everyone in Palestine, and remember that every dead person is a dead person." Later in the show, I'm going to quote Dave here, later in the show, there was a commotion in the upper deck. Chappelle joked, quote, I'll read it verbatim, "That still might be the Jews coming for me." He then urged someone in the crowd to call emergency medical responders before being reminded audience members didn't have their phones because of the Yonder Pouches thing. Dave said he never thought about what would happen without them in an emergency. Then he joked, I'll read it verbatim from the Times, "Sorry," Mr. Chappelle said, stretching out the word, quote, "I don't want the Jews to know what I said." The Times writes the audience cheered him loudly, and the hour and 15-minute set did not appear to have caused the kind of walkouts that marked the Boston show. Matt Rffe will have his special on Netflix on November 15th. I finished listening to his interview with Tom Segura. That came out last week, and I guess they recorded it in September. I'll pull from the transcripts when I get a chance. We've obviously got a lot of news to cover today. Anyway, the trailer is out. The special is November 15th. I'm going to play a clip from the trailer, but this is the only clean part that I even dare play for you.
I can't stand social media, which I know is crazy because it's why you're all here.
Good joke there. Matt Rffe, Netflix, November 15th. KC.com was interviewing Nikki Glaser about her return to Kansas City, and they have a timely question, which was, there's much discussion about Hasan Minhaj. What are your guidelines when weighing truth versus a better punchline? Good timing here, KC.com. Nikki Glaser said, exaggeration within stories and using hyperbole to get a joke across is expected. A lot of times I'll make up a fake premise for the sake of a joke, but those jokes are not painting me as a hero. I'm not delivering them like it's a TED Talk about something horrible that happened to me that I want everyone to be on the verge of tears about. The way he wielded his lies were not for the sake of comedy. They were for the sake of people feeling emotional and feeling sorry for him. It was an act of fiction, the way he would cry and be emotive over saying things that really pull at your heartstrings, but it was done under the guise of that this happened to him. So I find it inappropriate and manipulative the way he did it, but I do agree with him that most jokes are like 30% exaggerated. Ilana Glazer is playing the Tennessee Performing Arts Center James K. Polk Theater in Nashville 2 nights. She told the Tennessean, "I'll be eating your hot chicken. I've done it before, and I was pretty good. I'll definitely be timing it correctly with my show so that, let's just put it this way, so that my performance is not affected." What will we hear on her show? Being a mom, being a stoner mom, anxiety and depression, my identity as a Jew, being a teenager in the early aughts, which was a pretty vulnerable time to be a young woman, and we're ragging on Florida a little bit. If everything went according to plan, there is a podcast called the Pod News Weekly Review, and I'm the guest if you want to check that out. Pod News Weekly Review. I'll put it in the show notes if I remember to actually do that. If you want to join us in the Facebook group, one rule, don't be a porn bot. If you're not a porn bot, we did have to make it a closed group, so just knock on the door and I'll go, is this a porn bot? And then I'll let you in. But if you are a porn bot, I might get distracted for 15, 20 minutes and forget to do the show notes. The 312 Comedy Festival kicks off tonight. It is a pretty big festival. I'll be talking about this for the next week. It runs until November 5th. Big names like Michael Che, Nate Bregazzi, Hannibal Buress. Nate said, I moved to Chicago in 2002 with a buddy. Took some classes at the Second City, and then in 2003, I took a comedy class and did lots of show at the alt comedy hotspots Lion's Den and the Lincoln Lodge. I was with Hannibal Buress, TJ Miller, and Pete Holmes before we all followed Pete to New York. What a crowd that was. Anytime I go to Chicago, it's crazy. It's always been one of the first cities I would always sell the most tickets. They got on board with me a bit earlier than other cities, and having started here certainly plays a large part of that. While he's hosting SNL this week, he won't have any trouble selling tickets. Not that he does. Nate's were really good. The fest is special because I saw the Chicago Theater when I was first starting out, and I don't think I even knew you could even play it. That meant I was so new and didn't know what was going on, so now it's unbelievable to reach that stage. Lynn Ricecub, remember her? Chloe from 24? Yeah, she's a comedian. She told the Daily Herald that her Midwest nice demeanor goes out the window when she does stand-up. She said, I love that about stand-up. You can get weird and silly. It's always satisfying, especially when a show doesn't go how you expect, which is all the time. With stand-up, you're always having to rethink what you're doing. You keep getting the rug pulled out from under you. Her material comes from her own life. Lynn says, I don't like to speak about things I'm not completely informed about, and the only thing I'm completely informed about is my life. Remember I told you about the wax statue of The Rock? I guess this really isn't a comedy story at all, other than it's funny. Well, Francis Musset-Grevin, how's my French today? I nailed it. Took The Rock's comments and social media outcry seriously within 24 hours. The figure of The Rock was updated by artists who gave it a slightly darker skin tone with meticulous strokes of oil painting, says Vulture. However, he's still dressed in a suburban dad outfit. Speaking of which, I forgot why I brought up the Facebook group. I got so distracted by the porn bot joke. It's Halloween weekend, right? My kids say Halloween weekend is a thing. Anyway, if you've got a costume and you're not a porn bot, go to the group, share a picture. My Jimmy Buffett was really good. I shared it with you guys. It was really, really good. So if you're not a porn bot, do that. If you are a porn bot, send it to me. John's naughty today. I'm just having fun. I'm in a good mood. Where was I? The Rock. We were talking about his wax figure. Veronica Perez is the museum's head of PR and said, we found his reaction rather friendly when addressing the fact that his figure was indeed whiter than it should have been. Now, this next sentence is very funny because the article points out that some of the famous celebrities that Veronica Perez has worked with include Michael Jackson. Again, I'll read her quote. We found his reaction rather friendly when addressing the fact that the figure was indeed whiter than it should have been. Unfortunately, we didn't get to meet Dwayne Johnson, so we used several photos, but as it turns out, pictures can be very tricky because the nuances of skin tones can differ depending on the lighting in the photos. Every time, the sculptor has to determine the exact face and body shapes, the volumes, and it's always a very complicated challenge if we haven't met the person. You know, it's a shame The Rock doesn't have an Instagram account. Oh, wait, he does. And 392 million people follow it. If only were there some photos of Dwayne The Rock Johnson. If only he had ever been on TV or in a Fast and the Furious movie. If only some way to get a feel for what Dwayne The Rock Johnson looks like. We conducted a casting of models based on his body measurements, and that wasn't a small undertaking because we had to find a man who had roughly the same body type as Dwayne Johnson, a height of 6'5", with those huge muscles, and we found our model in a bodybuilding club. Were they whitewashing Johnson's figure? She says, this has nothing to do with it. We just made an honest mistake based on the photos we looked at. After we saw all these reactions on different blogs and social networks, we changed it immediately. No reaction from The Rock at this time. I'm going to wrap it there. Reading that Hasan Minhaj thing exhausted me. I know I didn't forget to do Mulaney. I'm bouncing it to tomorrow. And I didn't forget to tell you the Vulture 25 people. I'm bouncing it to tomorrow. That is your comedy news for today. You can follow the show on various apps. If you're on an Android, how about Overcast or Pocket Cast? I love Pocket Cast. That's actually the app I use. Spotify, or, if you hate back catalog episodes, I guess you could go to Apple Podcasts, but you're going to have to download the back catalog episodes you missed yourself. It's not like they're going to automatically do that for you. Thanks for nothing, Apple. See you tomorrow.